would like to welcome everybody and thank you for joining us from wherever in the world you're from. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. As Renan said, my name is Jeff Bonkowski. I'm a Western area manager. I cover everything in United States west of the Mississippi and also in Western Canada. My background is as a retired firefighter with over 30 years of training, and through my career I trained to the level of a hazmat specialist as well as being a paramedic. So I concentrated as much of my time as I could to learn about the high hazard, big fires firefighters are faced with. And that's pretty much what led me to hazard control technologies, because here, while I was doing my consulting work and doing training with firefighters, I thought in the 21st century, there had to be a product on the market that could better assist firefighters, emergency responders, in being able to deal with some of the high hazard fires we're faced with. And I mean, daily, we're learning more and more about the product that we're going to be talking about, Encapsulator Agent. I hope that we've added some of the newest materials in this presentation. So it has been changed up from the past, and I hope it is informative and answers some questions about how an encapsulator agent works. When we sit there and we talk about hazard control technologies, we like to let people know that our mission is to make the world a safer place, through that leadership, the fire prevention. We're looking at it also from the standpoint of using an eco-friendly, innovative 21st century technology that works on these fires that we're going to talk about. Our company is based in Fayetteville, Georgia, is where our headquarters are. And as you can see, our distribution network is global and it continues to grow. As we speak, they're working on, creating new markets in other areas of the world, in other countries. So I want to start and talk a little bit about our objectives. Hopefully I give you a better idea of some of the hazards that we're faced with on the roadway, and the difficulties. We're going to talk about these three-dimensional fires. What are they? Let's maybe get a definition of a three-dimensional fire as we go through here. You're going to hear me talk a lot about a spherical micelle. Very important that you understand, and I hope I make you understand what a spherical micelle is, how it works, and how it is different than current extinguishing agents that firefighters and departments and people may be using. So when we sit there and we go through and we start talking and identify the encapsulator agent, we're going to talk about how, again, in the fire service, we talk about the fire tetrahedron. We'll see how it reacts with all the different legs of the tetrahedron. I want to make sure that I hopefully explain to you how this agent is able to work on all classes of fires, especially when we sit there and start getting into some of the collisions and things that we're going to talk about. So when we talk about these roadside and these collisions and things, we're dealing with many different issues. We're dealing with the crashes themselves, fires that may take place, and most often some type of a fluid, gasoline, diesel fuel, some type of a spill or a leak that may be part of that incident, and how we can make that a little bit safer to work in. And I'm hoping that we can explain. But when we sit there and we look at the report from NFPA, they're saying 8% of firefighters in the line of duty deaths, and this is from 2019, were from being struck by vehicles while operating on the roadway. Those distracted drivers, those, people that are on their cell phones, or, maybe, doing something else in the vehicle and not paying attention. And unfortunately, because of even maybe road conditions being slippery, firefighters are being killed. So hope in this presentation, I can go over how we can get firefighters and people off the roadways faster and safer. So I want to talk about how things are evolving. because the roads are so much different than they were 10 or 15 years ago. I mean, we had basically just vehicles that were powered by gasoline or diesel. And now all of a sudden we're starting to get into E85 and ethanol powered vehicles, as well as your hybrid vehicles, and now lithium-ion battery powered vehicles. And we listen to the news and we listen to the automakers, and many of them are pledging to have, half of their fleets, half of the cars they make by 2030 electric. And if things work according to their plan, by 2035, they may be making only lithium-ion powered vehicles, trying to get away from the normal internal combustion engines that we're used to today. When we look at the fires that we're faced with and the classes of materials, big part of the vehicles are Class A materials. You've got, the tires, the interiors, plastics, synthetic materials, composite materials. And when they burn, they give off toxic gases. Not only do they give off the toxic gases, but just like in our structure fires and our hose fires, as they add these composite materials and these synthetic materials, the fires are burning hotter. And by burning hotter, they're becoming more difficult to extinguish. So because of the fact that we're having problems cooling them. When we sit there and start looking at the Class B materials, the diesel fuel, the gasolines, all of the other agents or all the other fuels that might be used in our vehicles, we look at the spills and how they can run down the roadway, or how, they can be leaking out of, as this shows, a hole in a fuel tank from, maybe an object that, came up off the roadway and punctured the tank, caught on fire by the hot exhaust. That's a three-dimensional fire. And I'll talk more about that. But, when we sit there and we start talking, and as I go through here, we're going to talk about the three-dimensional fires and how current agents are working on them, or maybe not working on them. So the Class D metals involved, again, are the E10 gas that we put in our vehicles pretty much every time we fill up. If you have a vehicle that works on ethanol, it might be E85. When we sit there and we look at ethanol being in transport before it gets splash mixed into the gasoline, it's an E95, and you get into your diesel and your biodiesels. When we talk about these Class B metals, I'm not just talking about what we're putting into the tanks to make our vehicles go, but I'm talking about what's being transported also in the tank trucks. Okay, there's so many things: the heptanes, the crude oils. There's so many different flammable products that are being shipped, not only by roadway, but also on rail. And many of these become three-dimensional fires. And I hope to get into a little bit more about what a three-dimensional fire is. And when we sit there and we look at our first video, this is a three-dimensional fire. It's a tank truck that hit the wall and caught on fire. And what we're doing is we're using foam. Unfortunately, he's using a straight tip nozzle. And as we know, in order to really make a good foam blanket, we need to add air. We need to get some aeration. He's not getting that. These side-by-side videos are actually of the same vehicle. And I put them in here for a reason. And I'm going to start the other one so that, it starts to play too, because when you see them using the foam, there's only three application techniques when we're using foam. It's rain it down, bank it in, and roll it on. And I guess this is kind of like a rain down method, but again, without the smaller droplets, using a straight tip, it's not very effective at being able to extinguish. Here now we're going, and because the foam's not working and they end up running out of water, so they've called for a crash fire rescue vehicle from the airport. Now they're using a dry powder, hopefully to extinguish this fire, because it's a three-dimensional fire. And I say that because if we go to NFPA 11, which is the foam standard, and we look in Annex A11 of the standard, it's going to state foam's not suitable for a three-dimensional flowing liquid or gas fire. But yet, what tools has the fire service had up to now to deal with a three-dimensional fire? Well, it's been powder. And that's why when we look at our airport crash fire rescue vehicles, well, they have dual agents. They have the foam as well as the dry powders. Why isn't the dry powder working on this three-dimensional fire? It's doing nothing to get rid of the heat. Okay, we have that constant metal that's heated up. It's hotter than, the ignition point of gasoline, so the powders can't cool. So again, it's not able to extinguish this fire. When we sit there, we go to the next video. Again, we're looking at all the foam that's been applied, but yet the truck is still burning. It has had no effect. We would need to build up a foam blanket over the top of that truck in order to be able to smother the fire. Okay, foams work on two-dimensional fires. It does not work on the three-dimensional fire, as that Annex A11 states. When we sit there and we start looking at some of the other ways that, we're sitting there, we're looking at, fires that take place, here in sports, racing. Again, we're looking at a three-dimensional fire. And we're going to now watch multiple agents being used and how ineffective. Here you are using, a dry powder. We're using some foam agents out of a extinguisher. And as you can see, they're very ineffective at being able to cool and extinguish and put this fire out. And all this time, you still have the person who is driving the vehicle that is inside the vehicle, waiting and hoping that, they can get this fire put out. But just give you an idea, look at the number of extinguishers and how much product is being used. And as we go through the presentation, we're going to see how, this encapsulator agent, the spherical micelles, change the ability of these extinguishers to be able to fight these everyday fires. But again, you see that fuel running down that roadway. And as it runs down the roadway, it's a three-dimensional fire. Again, foam's unable to extinguish those. So let's take that auto accident that I just showed and think about it as an auto accident on the highway, where now we are trying to get into that vehicle. The fuel hasn't caught on fire, but yet we've got firefighters and we got our medical people and we've got others that are standing in a hazardous spill, trying to perform a rescue and get somebody out of a vehicle. How do we make those scenes safe for our first responders? How do we make those scenes safe for people when they're on these scenes? And this is one, this is actually a video that's in English, but Hernan was nice enough to put some Spanish in there, so our people from, Spanish-speaking countries can kind of follow along. But let's look back at that spill that we just saw. And when I talk to departments and fire departments, when I'm doing my trainings, I always ask the questions that, when they have those fuel spills, what do they do? How do they make that scene safe? And, they put down foams, they pull out their hand lines and so on. And many times I'm told that what they'll do is they'll put down some absorbent materials, some clays or other things, to try to keep the vapors down, so that while they're trying to perform the extrication, while they're trying to get the people out of the vehicle, okay, hopefully the agent or this powders that they start using to suppress the vapors will help to reduce the hazard. But as you're going to see here in just a second, he's going to come along with a torch and, hey, there's the ignition source. And as you can see, that clay, that absorbent material did very, very little to be able to stop that from catching on fire when he had an ignition source. So now we're taking, and again, this is just a 2.5 gallon, 9-liter extinguisher. With a 3% mix of F500 that is being used. And as you can see, he's spraying down that absorbent material as well as the fuel. He's encapsulating the fuel. And as we'll see here in just a few minutes, how that encapsulation property works. So he's, by doing this, is making that scene safe. Okay. And again, we're going to watch him. He's going to walk over, he's going to go pick up his torch, and he's going to come back over after this has been encapsulated, even though there's been an absorbent material used. Okay. He's going to come back through with the torch, and he's going to show you just how effective, a 3% solution of an encapsulator agent F500 is in being able to help render this scene safe. And as you can see, he is going to now walk through with the torch, pass it over the entire surface, and that fuel is encapsulated. That scene is now safe. Those rescuers, those people that are working, trying to get the patient out of the vehicle, are safely able to work without the fear of a spark or an ignition source catching the fuels on fire. Another big thing automakers are trying to do is make cars lighter, trying to reduce the weight, but yet they want to make sure that they're still a strong, they don't fall apart. They want to make them lightweight and strong. So they're going into some different types of metals, magnesiums and titaniums. Okay. And again, it creates a new hazard for us in the fire service. Because of the high temperatures that these metals burn at, they cause water that we many times use on fires when it deals with automobiles. It causes the water molecule to break off into its two properties, hydrogen and oxygen, which causes an explosive atmosphere. And that's why we see those huge explosions when we're dealing with these types of car fires. And just an idea of all the different parts that are made. And this is just a few of the parts, but you got steering wheel, and you got, some of our dashboard and different mounting brackets and different parts of the motor. And the average amount of magnesium, when I was doing a presentation before, I believe it's somewhere in there about 380 pounds of magnesium is on the average vehicle. Some have more, some have less, but on average it's somewhere in the area of about 380 pounds of magnesium that you can find in various parts of our automobiles. And again, some have more than others. So when we sit there and we start thinking about all the different hazardous materials, and again, I'm going to start getting now into the transportation side of things, okay? Because, they're shipped. Not only are they in vehicles, but now we have to start looking at tankers. We have to start looking at trains. And here was a train derailment that occurred in Chile where F500 was used to help to mitigate, okay, the spill of the diesel fuel in the soil. Again, neutralized to get rid of the flammability, but also to remediate it. The agent will be able to encapsulate the diesel, and by doing so, it can remediate that scene over the course of time. One of the things that you're going to see in here at the very bottom, though, is it also says end sulfuric acid. So they use the F500 not only to deal with the diesel fuel spill, but they were able to also neutralize the sulfuric acid. It went from a pH of 1 to a pH of 6. And the part that's amazing when they used it is, again, I mentioned my hazmat background, and anytime you sit there and you try to neutralize an acid or a base, you get some type of a reaction. Usually heat is involved. There's a cloud. There's something happens when you try to neutralize an acid. And in this event, they used the F500. There is no exothermic reaction, and there is no cloud that was formed by using the F500 when they were using it for that. And here again is another example where F500 was used with sulfuric acid. The picture of the truck here, the white truck hitting the back of this tanker. That tanker truck again was carrying the sulfuric acid. When the cleanup contractor came, in the top picture here, you'll see the plume, the cloud that was made. And that was being caused because they were trying to use moist dirt or soil to try to cover up that soil. And then you see him here They're using F500 with a 3% solution, and they're able to neutralize, spray it in there. And unlike the first picture we saw, just that little bit of moisture that was in the soil causing that huge cloud, here they're using F500 3% solution out of a fire hose, and they're able to neutralize that acid very effectively. Again, no exothermic reaction. We sit there and we talk even more. Here's an incident that happened in Arizona. An 8,000 gallon gasoline tanker that was carrying gas and diesel went off the roadway. The unfortunate part about this is, and in many cases, when contractors or environmental companies or people that are responding to these accidents arrive, we try to unload and reduce the weight of that tanker before we try to get it back up onto the roadway. Here, they were unable to open the valving. And so as you can see in this video coming out, they opened up the dome hatches. They began to roll the tank over onto the top, and they were allowing the tank to just, or the fuel to just spill out onto or into the ground. Here they're using F500 to keep the vapors down, suppress the vapors, prevent any type of ignition or a spark while they're in the process of rolling that tank truck. And then in this other, you're going to see as they start to bring that tanker truck back up onto the roadway, they're using the F500 and making sure that no sparks, no vapors that could cause a explosion or fire are in the area. They're encapsulating, and we'll talk again as we go through about what that encapsulation is. But just to point out the benefits and how we're going to sit there and see. And in this video, we're going to get a better understanding of the difference. Okay, here's a split screen video, and it's going to show our current technology, our foam. Here's a simulation of a tank truck that was done in Vietnam. And you're going to see how on the left, using foam, they're using their aerated nozzles, their combination nozzles. They're working to apply the foam. This is a three-dimensional fire. On the left, you're going to see them using a 3% mix, a solution of F500 in a hose stream. And you can see how quickly, through using this agent, he's able to do multiple things. He's able to rapidly cool the steel, which is a reignition source, and he's able to encapsulate the flammable vapors, okay, which help to be able to extinguish the fire. And not only that, but the fuel that's on the ground, he's working also to encapsulate that fuel. So you can see how ineffective the foam is. Here we've got, I can see in that picture, three lines. I'm trying to control that fire, and they're not having much success, but yet here on the right, the fire's out. It didn't take long, you know, a few seconds to be able to extinguish the fire. And you'll see that, you know, the one here on the right, until all of that fuel burns away, they are not going to be able to extinguish that using our current foams that we use. Another growing hazard that we have in our vehicles and on our roadways is the lithium-ion batteries. And I know when we hear many, I'm going to say so-called experts talk about these fires, they always say that the only thing that will extinguish a lithium-ion battery is copious amounts of water. And you know what? And through all of my training as a firefighter, I've yet to get a definition of what a copious amount of water is other than a lot. So we're going to talk and we're going to see how we can sit there by adding an encapsulator agent into our water stream. We're going to make that water more effective in being able to stop the thermal runaway. And I'm going to put some information that we've just received showing you how effective we are dealing with some of the other issues that happen when lithium-ion batteries burn. So we're going to hopefully give you some additional information, some new information about, all of these. And this is showing how, when we look at these lithium-ion batteries and how they're categorized, they're categorized as a Class A fire. But again, I mean, how many times we hear about how difficult these fires are to put out, how much water is being used.
Deadly crash involving one of Tesla's cars with an autopilot feature. The car slammed into a tree and burst into flames. Police tell ABC News it appears no one was in the driver's seat. Here's ABC's Gio Benitez.
Tonight, mystery surrounding a deadly crash near Houston involving a Tesla Model S. The charred wreckage captured on camera after it crashed into a tree and burst into flames. 2 men inside were killed. The Tesla's high-energy battery reigniting over and over again. Firefighters trying to put the fire out for 4 hours with more than 30,000 gallons of water. The fire eventually put itself out.
Okay. 4 hours, 30,000 gallons of water, but the fire eventually burned itself out because it kept reigniting when they were using the plain water. You can see all the water that's running down this roadway. But some of the things that we don't think about is what is in that runoff water. Okay, what kind of chemicals, what kind of hazards are we washing down the roadway into the sewers, into our streams, into our creeks? What kind of an effect are we having on the environment when we're using copious amounts of water only to sit there and come out and make the statement that it eventually burned itself out?
Deadly.
So let's now get and change gears and let's start talking about Encapsulator Agent. I've talked about the spherical micelles, and we've seen some videos. So let's hopefully get a better understanding of what it is. It is a fluorine-free agent. Okay, it's biodegradable, it's non-corrosive, it's a CUL, US, and NFPA listed fire protection suppression agent. And it works on combustible and flammable. And I always like to mention this when I deal with my firefighters, because I ask them the question, in the fire service, can you name me any other agent that can work on a flammable vapor? And in most cases, I get a lot of stare looks because there isn't one. Well, we're going to see how, when we talk about an encapsulator agent, we're now going to have for you an agent that can work on flammable vapors and help mitigate these fuel spills. We saw and we talked about that train derailment. Well, we're going to talk even more so about how an encapsulator agent can work on being able to deal with those. I'm going to talk a lot more now about the spherical micelles, what they are, okay, how they're formed, how they work on the carbon molecules and the polar fuels as well as the non-polar, the hydrocarbon fuels, and how they work on all of the different combustible and flammable liquids that we're dealt with. And I mentioned earlier that tetrahedron. We're going to talk more about how it works on all those classes. But in order to understand
Encapsulator tech.
In order to understand what a spherical micelle is, you first really need to understand our molecule. And the basic building block of of an encapsulator agent of a spherical micelle is our molecule, which has a polar head which loves water, and a non-polar tail which fears water and wants nothing to do with water. That polar head will instantly mix. So as the concentrate comes into the water, and it can be batch mixed, it could be inducted, however, as soon as that agent gets in, it creates and forms these spherical micelles. Okay, so those spherical micelles will now travel through the stream, and they'll come out, be a sprinkler head in a building, your fire hose, the nozzles, a fire extinguisher, and those molecules closest to the surface of the water droplet, because those tails want to get out of the water, they break open and those tails come to the surface. But yet inside of each and every water droplet are still millions and millions and millions of spherical micelles. So as you can see, I have now chemically changed the makeup of a water droplet. Okay, I am working on a chemical molecular basis, unlike a foam, which is working on a mechanical basis. Okay, I'm going to now show you how by changing that water droplet, I'm going to be able to work on extinguishing and having effect on the three-dimensional fires. How we're going to be able to change the cooling mechanism of water as we go through. So again, I just want to show that molecule, and hopefully, again, it's important that we understand this and the difference when using an encapsulator agent. You know, again, the polar head, it loves water, wants everything to do to be in water. And then that nonpolar tail, which is, it fears water and wants to get away from it. So because of that, as you introduce the concentrate into the water, okay, it's going to instantly agitate and mix without having to stir it up or shake it up, because those tails want to get out of the water. So as we saw in that animation, as it comes out of the nozzle through the hose stream, those spherical micelles that are closest to the surface, they break apart. Those tails, they spin out to get out of the waterway. And now I've put a skin on the surface of each and every droplet, and I've changed that mechanism of cooling. Where when we talk about foams, foam, again, working on that mechanical basis, is going to cause a separation between the fuel and the oxygen. It's going to keep the two from being able to support combustions. But however, once that blanket breaks down and it exposes the heat and the fuel, okay, we have a reignition, unless we are there to constantly continue reapplying the foam until the heat is dissipated. The other thing we're going to start talking about is the chemical chain reaction and how we're able to have an effect in being able to reduce the carcinogens and the toxins that firefighters are faced with when they start dealing with fires, because of all the different composite materials that are in our vehicles today. You know, that heavy black smoke that we see. I'm going to go over how the encapsulator agent is able to work on all the different classes of fires very effectively. You know, those class A fires, the ordinary combustibles, the class B, the fuels, the class D, which is the metals, and the growing hazard now in the fire service and in our homes, lithium-ion batteries. So we'll talk a whole bunch more. We're going to talk about those unique features of using the encapsulator agents. When we talk about it, and I'm going to bring up now the NFPA standard, because there is a standard that this agent falls under, is NFPA 18A. And within the standard, if we go to section 7.7, it covers the spherical micelle stability test. We're also going to see in here that when we use this agent, it gives us unprecedented burn back resistance. And I hope to talk a little bit and show you some examples of that burn back resistance. Earlier, I mentioned 3 application techniques when we use foam. Okay, when we use an encapsulator agent, the first thing we want to do is, you see, you know, we're spraying it off to the side. We want to make sure we see a milky white discoloration in the water stream to know that we have the agent in the line. Once we know we see it, okay, now we just aggressively, rapidly fight this fire. So let's think back to that tanker truck and even the simulation that we saw from Vietnam, where, you know, we had all of those foam nozzles being used to try to put out that 3-dimensional fire. And here we have, you know, a large 30-foot diameter pit with, you know, 100 gallons of fuel in it, and aggressively fighting the fire. It's out in a matter of seconds. With foam, again, 3 techniques. I can't bank it in because there's nothing for it to, there's not a wall in the background to hit and to have it banked down on. The rain down method would work, but how much foam is going to be wasted because of the heat generated by the fire as it's trying to rain down? You know, all those bubbles are going to be evaporated away. It's going to take quite a bit of foam to be able to start to be able to develop a blanket. And then if we roll it on, again, we need to create a large blanket up in front of the pit. And once we have that, large blanket, then we kind of use the hose stream to push it on and over the surface. So when we sit there, we start asking the question, we start looking at the standards of how long it's going to take, to be able to put the fire out with foam. Okay. How much foam are we going to need? Be able to flow it for the 15 minutes that might be required. And when we sit there, we start looking at the new foams, because the big push, what do we hear and read about in the news, in our fire magazines, all issues about the fluorinated ingredients in foam, the PFOS and the PFOAs, the forever chemicals, as they're called, causing cancer in the fire service. Well, when we sit there, we start looking at those non-fluorinated foams, they can require up to 3 times the amount to be effective. And in many cases, in order for it to function correctly, you need to use the same eductor, and you need to use the same techniques that were used in the test. And you don't have that same eductor and the same things, you may not have the same results on fires that it's been tested for. But when we sit there and start talking about F500 encapsulator agents, being able to extinguish these fires under 30 seconds, you just saw that large pit, being able to extinguish it in just a few minutes, or I should say a few seconds. We look at the benefits, when I talk about the foams, we're needing a blanket. Okay, we have to cause that separation. Okay, when we're sitting there and we're looking at encapsulation, we're going to see how we're able to encapsulate those flammable and combustible liquids. And once we encapsulate them, we render them non-flammable, non-ignitable. So there's no blanket that's needed. You saw with that video I showed with the kitty litters being used, how when they sprayed it with the encapsulator agent, we removed those vapors that could cause a spark. We remove that flammability. And by doing so, the cleanup, when you use an encapsulator agent to clean up or neutralize a fuel spill on the roadway, the cleanup is let it evaporate. Okay, if it gets into the soil, it will bioremediate faster. I wanted to show this one because in many cases, we have these fires and they cause us property loss, especially if the car is in a garage, in a parking structure. And again, I'm going to hear from some reports that were published in 2018. It showed there's 212,500 vehicle fires. And of those, there were 560 deaths and 15 injuries. But let's look at the property loss. Property loss was $1.9 billion. And I'm going to show you here what one F500 2.5 gallon water extinguisher can do. This is mixed with 3%. And you see, we've got a pretty good car fire that's taking place. And again, it's just 2.5 gallons, 9 liters. Okay, at 3%. And as you can see, he's spraying it down. He's spraying the top. He's cooling the metal. He's cooling the steel top. How effective one 2.5 gallon water extinguisher can be. And when you sit there and you start looking at a lot of our videos, we're going to see a lot of them having that heavy white mist. It doesn't mean it's still burning. The other thing is it's not steam. Okay, when we look at things that fire service has to worry about, and many injuries on the fire grounds and in firefighting, is it steam burns. Well, that heavy white mist is not steam. When you start using, because we've changed that chemical makeup of the water droplets and how the water droplets are used, okay, we are able to reduce the temperatures, okay, as you'll see, without creating steam. Okay, we're changing how that mechanism works. And just to give you an idea of that rapid ability to cool and extinguish, okay, here's the thermal circuit. Those tails that are now on the surface, okay, of the water droplet. They act like a heat sink, and they drive that heat inside. And if we remember back to that animation, all those millions and millions of spherical micelles yet inside of each droplet, well, they rapidly absorb that heat faster than the water. And then they slowly release that heat into the water that's around them. And in that process, the water never reaches 212 degrees. It never gets to the temperature where it creates steam. So there is no steam when you start using this agent in your water. We sit there and we look at this thermal imaging. Here they're using a Tko nozzle. It puts out 20 gallons per minute. And we can watch just how quickly the color changed when they sat there and they started using this encapsulator agent F500 to extinguish the fire. Okay, watch the change in the heat. It's doing two things. Okay, one, it's extinguishing the fire, but what is the main cause of fires reigniting? Okay, it's that heat. So if we can eliminate the heat, we're going to eliminate that source for reignition. Okay, so once we get that fire put out, it's going to stay out. You know, we just need to make certain that overhaul is done correctly, that everything's done properly, and it's done. Here's another example of that
hazard,
that heat reduction. Here, what they're going to do is we've got looks like a hood of a vehicle. We're using an acetylene torch. This temperature is in excess of 1200 degrees. It's probably much hotter than 1200 degrees. But unfortunately, back when this was done, the thermal imagery was limited as to the temperatures. Pay attention to the paint on the surface of this hood, that because of the heat starts to burn. And what are, again, the things that we need? We need the heat, we need oxygen, and we need the fuel. So now he's not going to spray the paint. He's going to spray it on the backside. He's going to spray the side that the torch was hitting. That paint that's on the front instantly goes out. Look at the change in the temperature on the thermal imaging. And now he's going to sit there and he's going to take with a bare hand, and he's able to sit there and put his hand on the spot that was just in excess of 1200 degrees in just a matter of seconds. He's been able to cool that steel. And again, it was just using a 2.5 gallon water extinguisher. So the ability to rapidly cool helps with multiple things. One, the need for less water. Okay. It rapidly is able to extinguish these car fires. Okay. Using 100 gallons of water or less. Less runoff, less environmental impact. Okay. We mentioned that video or the slide earlier of all the firefighters that were killed by the distracted drivers. We can get our firefighters off the roadway faster. We can get them off the roadway quicker and not being exposed to those distracted drivers. When we sit there and start looking at those tractor trailer fires, okay, being able to cool these means that, we don't have that time on the highway, as I said, but we're getting back onto the roadway. We're working on those tanker trucks, the fuel tankers, the rail cars, all these different three-dimensional fires that we're using millions and millions of gallons of water on. We're able to put them out faster. We're able to put them out quickly. And I know in many parts of the world, they're experiencing drought conditions. So when I mention again, 30,000 gallons on one car fire, if you're going through some drought conditions, do you really have an extra 30,000 gallons of water that you might be using for drinking or other things to be able to put out one car fire? So we're going to now talk about the ability of Encapsulator Agent F500 to start working on the reduction in toxins, the cancer causing, the soots, and the smoke, how we're able to improve the visibility. And I'm going to show this, and I'm going to stop it here as I play it, just to point out, because you'll see this in many of our videos where we start talking about, the black smoke changing to white. And, many times when I go and I do my presentations, we're letting the fire burn and we're spraying over the top just to show this. But I'm going to stop it here so you can see as we sit there, and we start attacking this fire, where'd the black smoke go? Okay, we still have lots of fire. I mean, you see how heavy the fire is, but yet there's no black smoke. As I start the video again, you'll see that it doesn't come back. Okay, we keep having that encapsulation. We keep reducing. And the same thing happens when we have these car fires, when we have our truck fires. We're actually starting to reduce the toxins, the smokes, and the soot that might have an impact on the community. If you've got structures, you've got houses, you've got, an area that's around there that, you may have to have an evacuation take place. Well, when we sit there, we start looking at using an encapsulator agent, being able to knock and reduce those toxins down considerably, we can reduce the impact not only to the environment, but also to our communities. This comes to us when we sit there and we look at that black smoke turning white. It was a test that was done by Clemson University. Looking at multiple things that the F500 was able to do versus plain water. And what they were doing is they were doing a test using an inverted glass funnel. The fuel source was toluene, and they ran a series of tests using plain water, spraying it through the smoke column, not trying to put the fire out there, just spraying it through the smoke column. They were looking for three different things. They were looking at the light transmission through the smoke column. They were looking at the buildup of soot on the funnel, and then they looked at the amount of the toxicity. They then ran the series of tests using a 3% solution of F500. And again, not trying to put the fire out, but just spraying through the smoke column. They saw that there was a 68% increase in visibility. There's a 97% reduction in the soot, but a 98.6% reduction in the toxicity. Where all the carcinogens, where the firefighters are getting cancer now, not only from the foams, but here, we've got, again, another occupational hazard, the toxicity from the smokes that we're being exposed to. And I'm going to mention back all those composite materials, okay, all of the toxic gases that all of the different parts of the vehicle are going to be giving off that are carcinogens. And when we get into and we look at, the Clemson study and the conclusion, it starts talking about, the vapor reduction experiment suggests that the interruption of vapor phase combustion possible by inhibiting radical coalescence into soot particles. So, many people ask, well, if you're encapsulating the smoke and the soot, what's happening to it? And this is explaining it. We're not encapsulating the smoke and the soot. We're interrupting that chemical reaction where those would be formed. Okay, we're having an effect. We're preventing that bond of those particles that are in the soot and smoke from being able to join together and make those carcinogens and make those toxins. So we're having a effect in that. So it shows how by doing so, we're able to reduce the toxins, the toxic byproduct by up to 98.6%. So it's benefiting, our firefighters, and it's benefiting the community by being able to reduce these toxins and all of the things that, from these large fires may be in the smoke that's going through our communities or raining down on our communities downwind. So we look at the abilities and the reduction and improved health, and we get into structure fires. Again, it totally changes how we deal and how we're able to safely deal with those fires as well. Let's get into our newest hazard, the lithium-ion batteries. Auto manufacturers, and I'm not just going to say auto because we're getting into farm equipment. Okay, John Deere. We're getting into truck manufacturers with, all the various truck manufacturers. Lithium-ion batteries are beginning to be part of many vehicles. We're seeing them in warehouses, in our lift trucks, our high-lows. We're seeing them at the airports in our support vehicles, being used in so many different things and applications today. And here's a quick comparison test that was done showing the difference between foam, powder, and F500. This particular test was done at Kiwa, the labs in the Netherlands, and it's showing powders and how ineffective a dry powder is. We're going to see in the center the foams. Again, foam is not suitable. We talked about many times that three-dimensional, but this is kind of another three-dimensional fire, but we don't have an effect. Powders are doing nothing to remove the heat. Okay, so powders can't put the fires out. Okay, we look at in the middle again, that constant spray of foam, very ineffective. It doesn't work. And then we look at F500, how effective it was able to extinguish. And this test was done on behalf of our F500 Encapsulator Agent German distributor, HCT Europe, along with Johnson Controls. So they teamed up to do this testing. And as you can see from the report that was listed and done by Johnson Controls, it shows how ineffective the powders were. They listed in the testing that was done that they were poor, and it's do not apply on lithium-ion batteries. When they did the foams, again, moderate to poor. The remarks, not recommended to apply on a lithium-ion battery. But when they did the testing with the F500 in all three tests, it was sufficient, and it is now recommended. And if we go to Johnson Controls or we go to the European website over in Europe, we'll see that they sell extinguishers and now have literatures and brochures out that state that the only effective agent that can stop thermal runaway and extinguish a lithium-ion battery is F500. And another recent report that we just came up on comes from us, the Journal Loss Prevention in Process Industry, and it shows a graph, and it shows a different thing that we're working on. We remember how we talked about the encapsulation of the soot and the smoke and that ability to have an effect? Well, one of the problems with our lithium-ion batteries is they create, when they burn, hydrogen, okay? And when this report came to us, it showed how when they did nothing, there were 476 parts per million of hydrogen when this lithium-ion battery was burning. When they used a water mist on the lithium-ion battery, well, it had somewhat of an effect. It brought the parts per million down to 217. But when they used a 3% solution of F500, it's coming way down. We're down now to 14 parts per million of hydrogen. That explosive gas. Okay, so we're having an effect. So as we learn more and more about how F500 encapsulator agent works on these lithium-ion batteries, I'm going to kind of show this video as I talk about it, because here we have an actual battery that's being tested. They're overheating, they're charging it using thermocouples, but we're going to see here it catches on fire. And when we start looking at this again, we need to understand we're not only dealing with the battery and the thermal runaway, but inside of each of these batteries, these 18650 cells, is a flammable electrolyte. And that flammable electrolyte is giving off these toxic gases, that hydrogen. So many of the agents that we're currently using can't cool and get those temperatures down. They can't eliminate the hydrogen. And what happens now if we have these inside of a truck, okay, and the battery starts to burn, and a firefighter comes open and it comes up and opens up the back, even though this fire may have seems to have gone out because of the smoke and the things that are inside. That smoke is still very, very, very explosive. So when they open up the back of the truck, okay, and they sit there and they start having air introduced, we create an explosion. And that's the type of situation that happened at a battery energy storage system in Surprise, Arizona. But here in just a second, you're going to see, in fact, there it goes, F500, which was in a system test being tested, just how quickly that screen went blank. The fire was out in just a matter of seconds. Once the encapsulator agent F500 was being used and discharged, instantly, just a matter of seconds. And it worked on multiple aspects of the battery. Again, it worked on being able to cool and stop the thermal runaway. It worked on being able to encapsulate the electrolyte, getting rid of that flammable source, that flammable fuel. And then it worked on being able to reduce that hydrogen, that gas that would still be there, as you can see. So the best part about using F500 encapsulator agent is it's fluorine free. It's biodegradable, non-corrosive. Been tested. There's no PFOS and PFOAs. So it's a very eco-friendly solution. It's a 21st century solution to our 21st century fires. It's not adding more hazards into the fire service. And we sit there, we start looking here, we see this, it's looking at all the different, lawsuits, all the different occupational safety and health of things that, reports that are out there talking about how firefighters, being exposed to some of the current foams, the airport people, because of these forever chemicals. And it's not just in the fire service. If you people living around airports, especially air bases or military bases, we've got places in the United States where there's a ban around Air Force bases where, the do not eat the deer or do not fish. There's a dairy farm that, the farmer has to destroy the milk. You can't, because the water, the groundwater is contaminated with these forever chemicals. The cows are you drinking the water. So here we have a poor dairy farmer that has to destroy the milk because of the contamination, the contaminated water that the cows are drinking. So when we sit there and start looking at the engineered equipment and the application, one of the things that you'll see in many applications with car videos, if you look at the videos on our website, we do a lot with this Tko nozzle, which is our turbo knockdown nozzle. It's 20 gallon per minute. It's a selectable percentage from a half, 1 or 3%. Works great on those car fires and some of your others, possibly wildland or vegetation type fires. Really good piece of equipment. I love it. You'll see it here in action.
Hazard
one of
control
the things
technology
that I also mention, because again, having been a firefighter and when I train firefighters, the firefighters have a habit that when they pull up on a car fire, they pull the hose off, they grab the nozzle and they open up the nozzle and they flow water until the truck is empty. So if the truck carries 1,000 gallons of water or 800 gallons of water, chances are they're going to use pretty much all of it. When you watch this video, you'll see he keeps shutting the nozzle off. Okay, it's only 20 gallons per minute. So if we we watch just how long he is truly flowing water, he's probably put this car fire out with maybe 20 gallons of water. That white that's coming off is not steam. You see him spraying the top of the car. Yeah, it's not burning. He's cooling the steel. We keep showing that metal plate, that hood where we had the torch on it, used a little F500. We could put our hand on it. Well, here he's at this particular demonstration. He's trying to use that solution, that F500 on the steel to be able to cool it so that they can sit there and they can come on. But as you can see, how quickly this fires out. He's doing his overhaul. as he should, making sure that there's no hot spots. Again, that is not steam that's coming off of that vehicle. So we look at the engineered, we start looking at the 2.5 gallon water cans and how effective they can be. I showed you earlier, you know, one of these little 2.5 gallon water cans, how effective it was at being able to put out the interior of a car. 2.5 gallons, you know, here you just saw with the Tko nozzle, it was 20 gallons. But you know, the technique, one of the other nozzles that are very, very effective, especially with dealing with Class D metals and some of the others with lithium-ion batteries, is our European water mist hose that's available for the extinguishers. Very effective. These are used when they were doing the testing at Kiwa Labs and some of the other testing that was done on lithium-ion batteries. So we have seen that they have been very, very effective at being able to work on extinguishing the lithium-ion batteries, and they give a very nice spray pattern. Some of the other things that HCT with our partners we cover, we have what we call our throw and go, and I'm going to just show real quick and talk about this. It's used again in being able to clean up the roadways, environmentally friendly, works hand in hand with the F500.
Hello, my name is Tim Johnson, and I'm the sales manager for a company called Amerisorb out of Olympia, Washington. We are the manufacturer of a Northwest premier product called Throw and Go, which is used as an absorbent to pick up fuel and oil spills in the roadways. Today I want to demonstrate to you why our product is the product of choice for so many. First, I would like to place some gasoline in the bottom of this lid. You'll be able to see how quickly it wicks the gasoline into itself. Now I'm going to put our product uphill from it. And the peat moss has a strong positive charge on a cellular level for hydrocarbons. So it acts like a magnet. And once it's pulled the hydrocarbons and contaminants into the cell, it will not release it again into the environment. As you can see, Throw and Go is rapidly drinking that puddle of gas. It's wicking it uphill, and it's sucking that puddle dry very rapidly. As you can see, in a matter of about 30 seconds, our peat moss brought in all of that gas, wicked it uphill, and sucked that puddle dry. Next, I'm going to show you the fire retardant and vapor suppressant nature of our peat moss. Because of the proprietary drying process that we use, our product acts as a wet blanket over flammable fuels and contaminants. Cover that with a fresh blanket of our peat. I'll put a torch directly on it. And as you can see, that Throw and Go will not allow ignition to take place, even though there's a lot of gas underneath that. Next, I'm going to pull this back and get into some of the wet, gassy peat, and I'm going to light a small fire, and then just a little bit of peat moss sprinkled on immediately snuffs out the flame. A couple of huge safety factors there. Most of our first responders, the biggest risk that they have with a fuel spill is a spark igniting an explosive fire. They love the fact that once they put Throw and Go down over the fuel, now they don't have to worry about that. It simply cannot happen with our peat moss. Secondly, all of your fuels and oils give off a toxic vapor. Our Throw and Go holds those vapors down so workers don't have to breathe them while they're working around fuel and oil spills. Next, I'm going to demonstrate how our product works versus the leading kitty litter with used oil. I'm going to put a couple of pancakes of used oil on this pan. I'm going to use a leading kitty litter that is available at all your auto parts stores and still used by many for an oil dry. And on the other side, I'm going to reuse our peat moss that's already brought in fuel. So this is a second usage for Throw and Go. Now, if you've worked with this type of product, you know you have to sweep it around, push it around, do the kitty litter dance, whatever it takes to get this product to pick up. And because it's not a true absorbent, It's a lot of work and it doesn't work very well. This product is actually classified as an adsorbent, meaning the oils and fuels will only stick to the outside of the particles. They're not being brought into the cell. So wherever this ends up after you pick up a contaminant with it, it's going to recontaminate the environment, called secondary contamination or leaching. The other issue with this type of product, if you read the back of the bag, it warns against silica dust, which is in all of your clay-based kitty litter type products. Silica is carcinogenic, causes cancer. They warn you not to breathe the dust. Again, ours is all organic and natural, will not harm the environment, people, or animals. Now the best part about our product, it's called Throw and Go, because you can throw this down, go about your business in the work site or at an accident scene, come back 10 or 15 minutes later, it's done the absorbing for you. You don't have to sweep and work it, just shovel it up with a flat shovel. Your surface is going to look like that instead of like that, because this is going to go after the oil on its own. It's going to ball it up like that, leaving the surface clean by comparison to this mess. Well, that's all we have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. You can learn more about our environmentally friendly line of products by going to our website at amerizorb.com. Have a great day.
So again,
hello, my name is Tim.
We work hand in hand with the Amerizorb, being able to keep those scenes safe, both environmentally friendly, ways to deal with your hydrocarbons, your fuel spills, and things like that that may be out there. The other thing, this is one of the things that, again, here in the U.S. we offer is our EF recovery. I know we've got some other people from outside of the United States that are joining us. I don't know how, again, things work there, but I mean, this is just a way for firefighters and fire departments and people to regain, as I showed you, the $1.9 billion in property loss. Well, some of that is equipment that fire departments are using. And, you know, many places have budget issues. And with these budget issues, they have difficulties being able to keep diesel fuel in their vehicles, or they have difficulties buying agents. So here is a way in the United States. It's a cost recovery. Many communities in the United States have cost recovery ordinances. And this is just a real quick video that talks a little bit about how it works.
There's been a crash. People are hurt. Fluids are leaking. Traffic needs directing. As you arrive on the scene, your priority is safety, care, and containment. The last thing on your mind is the cost of the call. But here's a question. Should your department have to pay for someone else's recklessness? If a city ordinance or county resolution says you're entitled to reimbursement, your department has a right to its money. And that's the problem. Do you have the time and the resources to chase it? We do. We're EF Recovery, one of the most experienced providers of billing services. Welcome to Response Recovery, a claims management program that recovers incident response dollars and gives them back to your department. With the Response Recovery Program, we have the infrastructure, insurance company relationships, and knowledge of the law to get you the money you deserve. Here's how it works. Using your fire reporting system, we locate and extract the MVA, obtain the incident report, and fill out all the incident paperwork. You approve the claim, we file it, and we pursue collection. If the claim is wrongfully denied, our team of experts pursues the insurance company and makes sure the claim gets paid. Submitting information to us is easy, and the claims review process is fast and convenient. There are no minimums or special requirements, and training is a snap thanks to our templates for manpower, consumables, and equipment that save you time. Best of all, you're in full control of the program. You determine who we speak to, the insurance company, the responsible party who caused the incident, or both. Our customer service is second to none. We use the maximum care, consideration, and professionalism, whether we're working with you, with insurance companies, or with residents in your community. We have safeguards to ensure accuracy and compliance, and we bill for all types of runs, so whatever incident your department responded to, we'll get to work on the reimbursement for it. If you're ready to recover the reimbursable expenses that you've earned, and you want to work with an experienced, seasoned partner, you want this flexible program. The Response Recovery Program from EF Recovery. Because your department deserves every dollar it's earned.
So that just covers, again,
there's been a crack.
Many departments do have cost recovery where they charge insurance companies because, again, it's part of a premium that a homeowner or a car owner or a trucker, a trucking company, that they're paying their insurance company for coverage. And one of the benefits of that coverage is money to pay and help fund the fire departments for the use of the materials that they might use, that absorbent material, the F500 concentrate. So it helps put some money back into their budgets so that they can continue to respond to emergencies. So when they sit there and start, that tanker truck and some of those other things where they're using hundreds and hundreds of gallons of foam concentrate, well, hopefully now by using an encapsulator agent, we can, instead of hundreds of gallons of concentrate, we can get it down to, just a few gallons of concentrate. You've seen the videos, you've seen how effective it is and being able to extinguish those pit fires, the car fires. You saw the test with the lithium-ion batteries and how it works on many aspects. So the product is very, very versatile. It works on all aspects of fires, unlike your other agents, where powders only work on certain types of fires, and foams, now we know and have a better understanding, only work on the two-dimensional fires. And in many cases, sometimes your firefighters are using Class B foams on Class A fires and things like that, which is again something that is very ineffective. So just trying to get a better understanding and a better grasp of the difference between the different types of agents and how it is different, and how Encapsulator Agent is the 21st century solution to 21st century fires. With that, I would like to get into the conclusion of saying that, that Swiss Army knife, or as Ron, one of our other managers, talks about, Frank's Red Hot. For those that aren't in the United States, it's a sauce, and their advertising is Frank's Red Hots. You can put that on everything. So it's like that Swiss Army knife. You've got one agent that is very, very versatile and works on being able to extinguish many different types of fires. It's able to deal with those fuel spills. And just as an example, because I've talked about that fuel spill, we talked about it on the roadway and being able to just evaporate away. But now you may have the question, well, what happens if it gets into the soil? What happens if that happens? And I'm going to give you a incident that happened here again in the United States. It was in Kansas. It was Topeka Regional Airport. They had a underground storage tank that was in the process of being filled. The person that was responsible for filling the tank connected to the wrong tank. And needless to say, when he began to discharge or unload his tanker truck, fuel started to come out of the vent pipes. The driver panicked, and instead of shutting things off, he ran. The estimates are anywhere from 3,400 to 4,000 gallons of jet fuel was spilled onto the roof of this pump house. It was spilled onto the infield around the area and onto the tarmac. And, within like 200 yards of where this incident was taking place was the control tower for the airport. The airport sent their crash fire rescue vehicles out to this incident, and they began to put foam blanket down to suppress the vapor. So hopefully it wouldn't find an ignition source. But the problem was the heat of the day. The heat of the day was causing those bubbles to just evaporate away. So about every 6 to 7 minutes, they were having to reapply. A local utility company, fortunately, has trailers that carry 500 gallons of F500 concentrate, and they make them available to the local fire departments in the event that there's an incident. First off, they're hopefully to protect the power company, but if there's an incident somewhere in the community, the power company allows them to utilize these trailers. So the Shawnee Heights Fire Department was just a part of a demo that had been done, and they saw how F500 worked. They called for this trailer, and they used, I'm told that it was somewhere in about 350 gallons of the 500, and they used it on this large spill. And they treated that roof and that pump house, and they treated the tarmac, and they treated the infield area, the grassy area, with the F500. And they let it set for 20 minutes. And at the end of 20 minutes, they walked the area with their multi-gas meters, checking for explosive limits, checking for an explosive atmosphere. And they checked every place. They checked that roof. They checked the building. They everywhere where the F500 was used, and they got 0 LEL. They had no flammable limits. So the chief that was in charge deemed that scene safe and let everybody go home for the evening and go home for the night. And he said, in the morning, we'll call for a cleanup contractor to come and clean up this and remediate the soil and dig it up and get it out of here. Well, in the morning, they had the contractor come in, and the contractor got their multi-gas meters out and their testing equipment, and they started walking around, and they kind of put their hands up in the air and, well, where do you want us to dig? So with the EPA and all the other people there, the airport officials there, they, well, we know there was some that was spilled right here. Why don't you dig up in this area here? So, I'm told they did like a little 10 by 20 area, and they scraped off, a couple, 3 inches of 4 inches of soil, and they started doing some testing again, and still 0 LEL. There was no sign that there had been a spill there. So they kind of directed the crew to, here, we'll try to dig over here in this other little spot. So they went over and they did another little test area where they dug some soil up, and again did some testing, and there was no indication based upon their monitoring equipment, their meters and stuff, that there had ever been a spill. And this was just after, like say, just a short period of time. So when you ask the questions about, those spills that, get washed off the roadway, it will remediate itself. It's no longer a hazard where we have to spend thousands and thousands of dollars to be able to dig soils up and then have to transport them to hazardous waste landfills and things like that. We look at and we talk about, in the conclusion, the health and safety benefits. That Clemson report showing how we're able to, that report that shows the ability to reduce that hydrogen gas, reducing that the explosive atmospheres that might be there, but all of the different carcinogens and the toxins that we get from these vehicles that are burning, and injuries that might occur. Being able to get our firefighters off of the roadways faster, okay, away from those distracted drivers, or even under adverse weather conditions. Okay, if it's in, these colder climates, it's freezing. Again, if we can sit there and we can use less agent to be able to extinguish a fire and cause less water runoff, okay, we're not going to create as much ice. We're not going to create even worse road conditions because of things that we're doing when we're trying to put these fires out. We saw the difference between foams, and I hopefully gave you a better understanding of an encapsulator agent, how it's different than foam, and how foam is unable to extinguish a three-dimensional fire. Yet F500 encapsulator agent is very effective and very efficient at being able to deal with those three-dimensional fires. So those copious amounts of water, okay, we can get a better understanding, instead of it being 30,000 gallons of water, maybe we're only looking at, 300 gallons of water, 3,000, but it's much, much less water that you need when you deal with the future fires, those automobiles, those lithium-ion batteries, less runoff. We mentioned that 30,000 gallons of water. What was being carried in that water with that Tesla fire? Okay, so with less water, we have less runoff, less property damage. Okay, so we're having multiple effects on being able to extinguish the fire and reduce the property loss that insurance companies are faced with. That soil contamination that I just mentioned, being able to have an effect and reduce the cost, and being able to have to do the cleanups, the PFOS and the PFOAs and the water contamination. I mentioned the effects it's having on wildlife and the cleanup cost. Some states are actually treating the use of our current fluorinated foams almost like a hazmat scene. You have to report how much, you have to report where it was used. And fire departments are no longer able to train using these foams because of the hazards that they pose. So there's a lot of things. So in conclusion, I'm hoping that this will give you a better understanding of being able to deal with these fires, give you a better understanding of how this agent works, and be proactive. Okay. Too many times, fire departments are reactive, or we as people are reactive to what takes place. Here's the chance to be proactive. Okay, we saw how we're able to reduce those toxins and soot. We saw how we have the effect on being able to reduce the hazards with lithium-ion batteries. Let's be proactive in being able to protect our people from exposures and our communities.
Oh, there we go, 1,095.
So just in conclusion, we're sitting here, we're going to see again, speed this up a little bit. Again, how quickly we're able to put this fire out.
Look for overhaul. That one melted. Now come here, watch. Come here.
Okay, we're going to see this Class D metal.
First. So we got the mags burning on the steering column.
Okay, as you can see, when they sit there, we start seeing this magnesium on a steering column. And why is this towards a conclusion? Because there's many times when we hit this magnesium steering column with a water stream, we have that magnesium flash out at us, causes firefighter injuries. Okay, it burns up turnout gear. So we're showing that just so we can see here in the conclusion how effective the agent is at being able to deal with these Class D metal fires. So I wanted to just kind of end on that point, showing you that there is a 21st solution to the 21st century fires that we're being faced with, and these high hazard fires. And with that, I would like to conclude this presentation. And I want to thank everybody for taking time out of your day, evening or afternoon, whatever it might be. It's been a pleasure being able to present to you as always. I hope I gave you some additional information, and we try to add things into our presentations as we learn, so that it's the most current information. And as I said at the beginning, we're learning things almost on a daily basis of some of the testing and some of the new things that this F500 agent's able to do. So with that, again, feel free. You can contact your distributor. You can contact HCT at info-world.com to get info. If you have any additional questions that you may think of later, don't ask them, or don't forget to ask them, I should say. We're here. If a question comes up later in the future, please reach out to us and get your questions answered. With that, thank you. It's been a pleasure. Look forward to seeing you at our next one. Bye.